Good morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, living on the Gulf Coast can be a blessing, especially when it comes to appreciation of our waterways and our beautiful bays. Now, this morning we talked to folks who are making sure that those waters are healthy and productive. Now, according to its website, the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program is dedicated to the wise stewardship of coastal water quality. Under provisions of the Federal Clean Water Act, the MBNEP developed what they call a blueprint for conserving coastal estuaries. In addition, officials say that they continue to respond to emerging environmental challenges. And by working with business and industry leaders, as well as hundreds of volunteers, the program hopes to protect the delicate watersheds. Now, there are many examples of the organization's efforts. In fact, 2 years ago, the MBNEP received a grant to install what are called litter getters to catch all of the trash that winds up in our rivers. Now, the goal is to remove thousands of pounds of this type of debris from the 3 Mile Creek watershed. This unsightly refuse could choke our streams and endanger wildlife. Now, litter getters are also being installed in the watersheds of Baldwin County. Efforts to control punishing stormwater runoff inspired a unique water conservation idea in the city of Pritchard. In turn, the idea provides fresh water for family gardens. Here's a report.
What we have is a rain barrel program. It's part of an effort to reduce stormwater effects in 3 Mile Creek watershed in the city of Pritchard. One of the issues we've been dealing with in this part of the watershed is stormwater runoff. We've had a lot of issues with residential street flooding, some issues with sanitary sewer runovers. Some of the follow-up work we've done suggested that one of the ways to try to combat this is looking at ways to reduce stormwater through putting in these rain catchment devices. So that's one of the ways we've been trying to work through that program.
I was just amazing how that worked. And it comes out now, it's full, it runs it sometime, and then when it rains, it really fills up really quickly. And I just amazing. This is a new adventure for me. 55-gallon drums, it's not going to solve all of our problems, but through this effort we're trying to concentrate these in a really defined area within this watershed. So as we get more of these out, it'll really hopefully help to reduce some of these localized issues with residential flooding. We've got a really good partnership with several different entities. Greif and Soterra have donated the barrels for us. Alabama Power has really been helpful. They've provided supplies and labor to help install. With those folks and Mobile Bay NEP, we've really had a good combined effort to put all these rain barrels out around the community.
And our thanks to Alabama Power's Alabama News Center that produced the report on the Pritchard Rain Barrel Project. Well, joining us this morning, Roberta Swan, Executive Director of the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program, and Jason Cadulis. He's the Restoration Project Manager for the MBNEP. Now, later in the program this morning, we'll be showing you clips from a documentary produced by the MBNEP. It will be featured in this year's Fairhope Film Festival. Perspectives returns in just a moment. And welcome back this morning to Perspectives. Our guest once again, Roberta Swan, Executive Director of the Mobile Bay NEP program, and Jason Cadulis, who is the Restoration Project Manager for the MBNEP. And we thank you both for being a part of this today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, on your website, you say a community desires water that is drinkable, swimmable, and productive for marine life. Many challenges, though, face the waters of the Mobile Bay Estuary as recently as 10 years ago. But let's go back to 1995 when you were created as an organization. What was going on then? What was the condition of our estuary?
So the biggest challenge with the creation of the National Estuary Program was that the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. And when that was passed, it was passed to regulate discharges coming from industry. So point sources, places where we know where the pollution is coming from. But between 1972 and 1995, with all of those industry discharges regulated, a new kind of pollution became more apparent, and that's non-point sources, so trash, stormwater runoff. You can't say where that stormwater actually came from, but it is causing negative impacts in the environment, and that was really the impetus for setting up the National Estuary Program for Mobile Bay. And we applied for that designation in 1995 and spent the next 7 years looking at, what are the biggest challenges, what are the biggest pollutant sources that we face, and how do we get a handle on better managing our water and our environment along the coast.
And when we say estuary, we're not talking about just the bay here. Give us an idea of how large an area we're talking about, because it's several thousand miles.
So the Mobile Bay watershed covers 3/4 of the state of Alabama and portions of Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi. And it is the 4th largest drainage basin in the United States. So over 20% of the nation's waters run through that watershed and into Mobile Bay and then out to the Gulf of Mexico.
That's a big picture there.
That's a big picture,
yes.
But the National Estuary Program focuses specifically on Mobile and Baldwin County. So if you think of the watershed as an upside-down Christmas tree that starts big and sort of filters or funnels down into Mobile Bay, we focus on that endpoint. So everything that happens throughout 3/4 of the state of Alabama ultimately washes down into Mobile Bay, and we're focusing on those sources and the watersheds around the bay.
So with that being in place now, when someone asks you, what does your organization do? What do you all tell them?
Jason, what do you tell them?
Well, we do a number of things, but certainly we try to bring stakeholders and different interest groups to the table. So we work with government, business, community groups to understand what their issues are and what challenges they may be facing, and then to pull all those resources together to make sure that we're a catalyst for positive change.
Now in the program we'll talk more about those partners, because your list is huge. I was very impressed to see the cities and groups and organizations that are working with you, and we'll mention a few of those throughout the program. I guess we saw one with the city of Pritchard partnering with the water containers there for you. So we talked about the estuary, and then the watershed is a part of the estuary, or vice versa, because give us that simple definition if you could.
So watersheds are drainage areas. So in between two ridges, the water all runs down to a central receiving body, and then that water flows through that receiving body out to a bay. Okay. So an estuary is where the fresh waters of our rivers and streams meet with the salt water of the Gulf. So Mobile Bay is that nexus, if you will. And our work is looking at all of the communities around Mobile and Baldwin County. Watersheds come in different sizes. There are small drainage basins that feed into larger drainage basins that lead into the big Mobile Bay watershed.
And you have those on your website where people can see where they live and where it may be. And
correct.
I thought it was interesting also, when you look at that, you see the expanse, but you also get an idea of when you're driving around and you see you're now entering such and such watershed.
Correct.
And is that something you think is effective for people to see those so they get an idea of their impact?
What's important about that is people that live in the Fowl River watershed, for example, out on McDonald Road, that's part of the Fowl River watershed. They don't see Fowl River.
Right.
They don't cross Fowl River because that's the headwaters of that watershed. But for them to realize that even though I live way out here in this part of Mobile County, what I do up here affects Fowl River down by the Pelican Reef. And so it's really trying to connect people to nature, connect them back to our natural resources and to our waterways. Because one thing I think we can all agree on is people that live in Mobile and Baldwin County, water runs in our blood.
Yes.
We all care about the water.
There's a history there, right?
Exactly.
And a part of the culture.
Correct. Correct.
Now, you worked with Dauphin Island before you moved into this position.
I did.
Did you see some things in that job where you saw even more of, I guess, the bigger picture?
Oh, that's a tough question. You know, I moved here in 2000 with my husband, and we did move to Dauphin Island. Originally, we live on Mon Louis Island now.
Oh, yes.
And what I saw was people's intrinsic connection with nature. And Dauphin Island really is a melting pot. There's the native community that's lived there over generations, and then there are many people that have moved down to the island from really a lot of the Midwest
right.
in particular. And to be able to have access to those beautiful white sand beaches and the maritime forests and the birds, and the nature is all around you on Dauphin Island. Frankly, across these two coastal counties, the access to nature is unparalleled. Having come from a very urbanized area in the Northeast, it really was like moving to paradise.
Right, right.
So although I moved down there with a community development focus, I quickly switched over to environmental protection, which really is a community development focus, but with a twist, if you will.
Now, Jason, you were a local guy from the area, and then after getting your degrees, you headed way out west to Utah. What drew you back to this area to now be a part of this MB NEP and as a project manager?
Well, I think it's always good for everyone to get out of their comfort zone and see what the world has to offer and learn those lessons. So I was fortunate to be able to join up with the National Park Service and work at a number of different national park units. But ultimately, seeing all that you know, marvelous nature and getting to experience a different side of things, I was always in the back of my mind thinking what lessons I've learned, and seeing a cultural shift in the way that people in Mobile and Baldwin County care about those resources, kind of moving to the forefront. The timing all just matched up, and I decided to come on home and hopefully contribute in some meaningful way.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the different things that you all involved in with the MB NEP. In fact, we'll also talk about a documentary that focuses on the environmental concerns of Dauphin Island. Now, this beautifully photographed video will be featured at the Fairhope Film Festival this month, in fact. Perspectives continues after this.
You see these birds that come in out of the Gulf. You hardly ever see them.
Frigate birds.
Yeah, frigate. They look like 6, 7 foot wide. And in summertime, old timers see that. So look at that, boy. Said it's bad weather in that Gulf.
You're watching the documentary "The Flight of the Frigate Bird: An Omen of Rising Seas," produced by the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program. Now, the film is being shown at this year's Fairhope Film Festival. And of course, as we take a look at that again, our guests Roberta Swan and Jason Kagulis here talking about the organization and that film coming up very soon. Give us an idea of how that came about and why you see it as a necessary vehicle.
So I mentioned that I lived on Dauphin Island when we first moved here, and we had the luck of living behind a Dauphin Island native, a family, actually Daryl Mallon, who you saw on that clip. And so we always heard, we would get together and fry fish on Saturday nights, and you know, we would hear the stories about what it was like growing up on Dauphin Island and how things had changed with how the island had developed over time.
Was he there before the bridge?
He was there. He was born on Dauphin Island.
Right.
And
that was
so to hear those stories was really somewhat magical. And as I became associated with the National Estuary Program and learned more about climate change and sea level rise and what challenges Dauphin Island faced into the future, I always wanted to be able to talk about what the natives had learned, because they had experienced some pretty significant storms back in the day. And I guess somewhere over the course of time working with the program, it just got in my head that I wanted to do a film about Dauphin Island and how they could really learn from the native islanders about how to be resilient in the face of changing climates, changing conditions on the island. Because some of those traditional tenets of how you live on a barrier island, they knew, but they would talk about how the people that had moved on to the island since then did not have that same connection to nature that they grew up with. So I felt like that was an important story to tell, and got together with the team at the NEP, and this was truly birthed out of many people. This wasn't a one-person job by any stretch of the imagination, and it took 6 years to put together.
Well, it's even more of a magnet to draw me to see it now as you share that type of insight. And I've had the pleasure of living near Barrier Islands. This is my 3rd time, and the ones on the Atlantic coast, where the Barrier Islands outside of Virginia and North Carolina. And I spent one overnight as a hurricane went over, working in this business and covering the news. And you have to have a respect for both the island and that weather that's coming when you are living in that type of condition.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned, and Jason, I want you to fill in the gaps here. We talked about some of those issues of concern, climate change, and of course the changes that we're seeing now with appearing to be different types and strengths of storms. How does that work into what you're doing?
Well, in the restoration project side, we try to put in projects on the ground that improve the resiliency of communities. So for instance, we did a project on the northern tip of Montlooie Island where the marsh right at the mouth of the river had receded and degraded over time back to a previous footprint. And so not only does that change potentially the river hydrologically, just resiliency to storm impacts, waves from the ship channel, waves from any impending weather, and being able to put that marsh back in place and create 4 acres of just a thriving salt marsh really does a lot to benefit not only the water quality and the resources, but that community that lives on that river.
You know, it's always interesting to hear that call Montlooie Island, and of course driving down you have no perception. But then my barber by chance grew up on that island when he felt it was an island. It's just amazing, you know, the perspectives that we have and the different standpoint. Before we leave from the film, tell us how we can see that this month coming up in November and get a chance to, I guess, enjoy the film festival at the same time.
Absolutely. So the film will be shown at the Fairhope Film Festival on November 16th, Saturday, November 16th at 2:30 p.m. I believe, and we are really excited about that, to be able to show it. It was shown at the Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham when it was first released, and you know, to be able to show it locally has been a real blessing for us, if you will. So people need to come out to the Fairhope Film Festival on Saturday, at least on Saturday, November 16th, and check it out. It's about a 25-minute film.
Right. Jason, growing up here, did you hear any stories that tied into what your perceptions were with the guys and the natives of Dauphin Island?
Well, I wish I had a chance to visit Dauphin Island. My parents are retired down there, and I still spend a lot of time today, but I bet it was a different world before the bridge was there. But certainly making my own memories growing up here on the coast and having that intrinsic connection with the resources has really played a role in my passion for doing this work.
How pleased were you all with the final project? It sounds just incredible.
After 6 years, we were very pleased. We were very pleased. And we've had a lot of positive feedback. And of course, the film is narrated by Shelby Lynn, who is somebody that spent part of her childhood in South Mobile County. And so to be able to have her be a part of the project was really, meant a lot to all of us. And she adds an incredible, just an incredible voice to the film. Now,
the name is familiar. Tell us who Shelby Lynn is for those who may not know.
Shelby Lynn is a singer, songwriter, and she is she's very well respected and very well known outside of, well, she's known in this area as well, but she lives in California now and she does her work out there.
When we look at the timetables and what has happened, and it's mentioned about 10 years ago, as an organization, are you all pleased with the progress that has been made since 2009, we're talking?
You know, I am very pleased. I had a conversation with someone yesterday and we were talking about, you know, how do we get people to look at new ways of doing business, new ways of protecting the environment. And one thing I said to him was, you know, did you hear the word watershed being talked about? And this was a person that runs a utility board in Baldwin County. Did you ever hear people talking about watersheds 10 years ago? And he said, no, I haven't. And I said, but that's all you hear about now.
Hold on to that point. When we come back, we're going to go more into that as we take another break here very quickly. And Perspectives continues in just a moment. When we come back, we'll finish that point as well as tell you how to find out more information about the Mobile Bay NEP. And welcome back to Perspectives. Again, we're talking with Roberta Swan, Executive Director of the Mobile Bay NEP, that's National Estuary Program, and Jason Cadulas, who is the Restoration Manager for the program as well. We were talking about the successes and how you're evaluating where the organization has made a difference in the last 10 years, as 2009 was another, I guess, benchmark period of time for you.
Yes. So watersheds is now a household word, but more importantly, it's a local government word, because when you're managing a watershed, that means you have to work with other communities. Watersheds don't follow geopolitical boundaries. So what I think our biggest success has been is bringing local communities together, locally elected officials together, local municipal staff together to combine efforts and leverage resources to do a better job of managing our waters and our local environment.
And that also has an economic
have,
impact,
and
correct?
It has an economic impact, absolutely. So,
And how would you gauge that?
Jason?
The different areas that it impacts from an economic standpoint.
Well, certainly when you're making investments to improve water quality, there's quality of life impacts of that, and those may be difficult to put a dollar sign on, but I think when you have those municipalities or beyond geopolitical boundaries working together, you're seeing a leveraging of dollars and entities working together towards a larger goal. And so I think in a lot of cases, funders and different monetary sources are more willing to work with communities when they see that there's not walls between them.
And of course, you were talking about, when you talk about that impact, it's not only, say, the quality of the water, but the tourism and the different industries. Speak of that, how those are collaborating with that.
Sure. One of our biggest projects to date has been in the D'Olive watershed. And you may be familiar with Alligator Alley, which is a little ecotourism area in the city of Daphne, Alabama. And because the work that we did in that watershed was back behind people's houses, it really wasn't accessible to the public, we were able to do a lot of interpretive signage and do a demonstration project at Alligator Alley to educate people about what we were doing in the surrounding area to clean up the quality of the water in D'Olive Creek, which historically has run very chocolate brown, and for the first time in over 10 years it's starting to run clear because of all the work we've done upstream to manage sediment inputs into the downstream waters. So that is an ecotourism that you see a lot of people stopping there, looking at it, hanging around in that park, reading the signs. That's an ecotourism opportunity. But a bigger one is kayaking. And the work that the city of Mobile is doing right now to build a trail along 3 Mile Creek, and Moz and many other partners are working to improve the water quality in the 3 Mile Creek watershed. That is going to become a huge passive recreation destination within the city of Mobile. I want to come back here in 5 years and talk about that, because I think that's a really exciting that's a really exciting project.
That is.
That's going to bring not only ecotourism, but we'll probably see a lot of infill economic development, community development, housing development, and just improvement.
Bring life back to a section of the community.
Exactly, and 3 Mile Creek has historically been the lifeblood for the city of Mobile, and we're gonna reestablish that distinction for that waterway and for the neighborhood surrounding it.
We thank you both for joining us today and talking about the organization. Of course, so much more that we could say, and this is just an intro into what you do, as well as understanding the appreciation that we should have as residents here about the Mobile Bay NEP program, and of course continued success, and we hope that everyone takes advantage of seeing the flight of the frigate.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you all both very much. Our very special guests, Roberta Swan and Jason Cadulas. Now, if you'd like more information on the programs and the projects of the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program, check out their website, or you can give them a call at the number you see right there on the screen. And join us here next time for Perspectives as we discuss those important issues as well as seeking solutions. Now, if you have any ideas, just drop us a note at perspectives@fox10tv.com. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week.
Great. Are we done? Yeah. All right, great.
Yes.